Senate in October 2017 as the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere within the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. He's currently the Acting Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere and the Acting Administrator for NOAA. Dr. Gallaudet was previously a Rear Admiral in the U.S. Navy, where his most recent assignment was Oceanographer of the Navy, and Commander of the Navy Meteorology and Oceanography Command. During his 32 years of military service, Dr. Gallaudet has had experience in weather and ocean forecasting, hydrographic surveying, developing policy and plans to counter illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing, and assessing the national security impacts of climate change. Dr. Gallaudet holds a bachelor's degree from the U.S. Naval Academy and master's and doctoral degrees from Scripps Institution of Oceanography, all in oceanography. Please join me in welcoming Admiral Gallaudet.
Well, thanks for that kind introduction, Jason. It's my honor here to kick off the National Oceans Month here by being the keynote speaker at this fourth ECWO. And so I'm really, really pleased to be here. It's very good timing. I'd like to thank first, though, the organizers and sponsors of this great event, and specifically those NOAA personnel who were just instrumental in making it all happen. So it's Dr. Link and Mr. Roger Griffiths. Where are you, Roger? Right over there. Thank you. And then where is Ann Hallowed? Where are you, Ann? Oh, Ann, thank you. So she led the scientific committee, and you put together a fantastic program. So thank you so much for your leadership. We have a great team at NOAA, and you're going to see through my marks that I have unlimited enthusiasm for all that we do. But first off, I want to make a point that this is especially timely, this symposium, because the President just released a proclamation last week proclaiming that June is National Oceans Month. And with that, he is highlighting a renewed focus that this administration is taking on the oceans, with NOAA being having a key leadership role with this renewed focus. And let me extract some quotes here from this proclamation. He said that Americans benefit from the ocean's bounty, from the industries it supports and the jobs it creates. He stressed that our exclusive economic zone, or EEZ, is an invaluable national asset and that we will streamline regulations and administrative burdens to promote economic growth while protecting our marine environment for future generations. And he also committed us to continue to explore, map, and inventory our nation's waters and pursue advanced observational technologies and forecasting capabilities, all in order to advance America's economic, security, and environmental interests. So as a career oceanographer and the acting NOAA administrator, that is music to my ears. So this, of course, is all related to why we are here today, to share information and advance the science in understanding our environment and our oceans. And you'll see that the U.S. is well positioned to do this. So first off, for my remarks, the theme of this conference and symposium is the effects of climate change on the oceans. I'm going to start off actually by turning that around a little bit. And I'm going to talk about the influence of the oceans on climate, and specifically I'm going to emphasize weather, the weather part of climate. And then I'll finish up and talk about what NOAA is doing to assess these changes in the ocean and also adapt to them and help our country better adapt to them. So first off, let's talk a bit about the influence of the ocean on weather and climate. I think I can best do this if I share with you a tale of 3 hurricanes, if you will. The first one, Galveston, Texas, 1900. The storm that hit that island was one of the greatest the Gulf had ever seen. And this was 30 years after the National Weather Service was established, and it still really had no ability to predict and communicate the impacts of storms like these. And so the result was that over 10,000 lives were lost when a 12 feet of storm surge just basically wiped the island off the map. A devastating, devastating event. A little over a century later, Hurricane Katrina hits the Gulf Coast. And there you saw a marked improvement in our ability to predict and observe this storm. And many Americans knew where it was and the timing of how it would impact us. But interestingly, we still saw 2,000 deaths in Hurricane Katrina. Why was that? It was because we weren't very well at communicating the impacts, and so local emergency managers and city officials just didn't really trust our forecast. So that's a problem. And I know this personally because I lost my house in the Mississippi Gulf Coast in 28 feet of storm surge. Now, I did trust the forecast, and I left early and evacuated. And I was able to at least keep two things that were important to me: my family and my boat. But yes, so we've learned from that now. And so when you look, the third hurricane is Hurricane Harvey. Hurricane Harvey hit the Texas coast this year, and it was the most devastating hurricane on record. $125 billion of damage. But when you compare it to Katrina, there were only 100 lives lost. So a 20th of the lives lost, and as damaging as Katrina. And why was that? It was because our weather service has gotten so good in terms of their modeling, their prediction, the observations that feed it, and the decision support. So we've really gained and improved. Now, the important thing about Harvey here, related to this conference, is the fact that this record-setting storm is a case study on why it's important to know and observe the oceans better. Because what happened with Harvey is the storm, as it tracked towards Texas, went right over a warm core eddy. And this warm core eddy caused the storm's intensity to go from gale force winds to hurricane force winds in less than a day. And it was that warm core eddy that fueled that rapid intensification. So that's just all the reason to understand the oceans better in terms of how we can use that to predict severe storms. In fact, our head of NOAA research, Craig McLean, is here today, and he always likes to tell you that if you have a good 7-day forecast, don't thank a meteorologist, thank an oceanographer. And he's absolutely right with that. So that leads me to all of this was recognized this year in April of 2017 when the President signed the Weather Research and Forecasting Innovation Act, or we'll call it the Weather Act. And this act mandates improvements in NOAA's hurricane, tornado, and severe storm forecasting and warning, as well as seasonal to subseasonal forecast improvement, or basically short-term climate. And so we're following this act, and it also requires advancing our understanding of changing ocean conditions through improved observations, coupled air-ocean modeling, and research into air-sea interactions. And this is incredibly important because the top 10 feet of the ocean contains just as much heat as the entire atmosphere. So just think about that. So I would call that this Weather Act is actually also an ocean act, and we're following it. This year's hurricane supplemental appropriations from the U.S. Congress included $100 million for NOAA to implement the provisions of this act, and it is a top priority for NOAA under this administration. So all that ocean piece of weather kind of leads me to the second topic of my conversation, and Dr. Link brought it up, and that's the blue economy and how what NOAA is doing to inform our public and to better adapt and advance our blue economy under the changing climate conditions. So you know the changes I'm talking about. We're talking about Arctic sea ice loss, warming waters, changing current patterns, ocean acidification, and sea level rise. Understanding these is as important to the administration as is more important to the administration because of what NOAA is doing in terms of advancing the blue economy. And I specifically talk about this is the Great Lakes, the coasts, and the oceans and their contribution to our GDP. And we want to do this sustainably. Consider these numbers. Coastal and offshore regions are home to 126 million people in the U.S. That's 40% of the population, and that number is increasing. The American blue economy contributes $320 billion to U.S. GDP. That's close to the total contribution of the U.S. telecommunications industry. Raise your hand if you have a device, a cell phone or an iPad on you. Yeah, like everybody on the planet. So that industry is on par with our blue economy industry. That's something. And so it's important. And here's another one actually too. Our blue economy grew at a rate of 5.7% last year. That is double what the rest of the economy did nationally. So this is an area of growth, and we need to understand the changes in the ocean to better harness and advance this growth, but also do it in a sustainable way. So let me share with you two ways NOAA is doing this. The first is through our fisheries. And first off, let me just say, our NOAA fisheries is an amazing success story. We, from depleted stocks of 2 decades ago, we are now have 91% of our stocks are not subject to overfishing, 87% are not overfished. We've rebuilt 44 stocks since 2000, just 3 this past year. And this is just a monumental environmental achievement, and NOAA Fisheries should be incredibly proud of their accomplishments. Raise your hand if you are in NOAA Fisheries. Very good, all of y'all can take great credit for that. So But there's changes happening that are affecting our management, our ability to manage these stocks well and sustainably. We see, interestingly, warming ocean conditions are causing stocks to migrate. One good example is the black sea bass in New England. Historically, kind of just stayed around southern New England. Now it's moving into the Gulf of Maine. And so we are having to do more adaptive management and really set catch limits that follow the fish, if you will. And that's what NOAA Fisheries is doing. They're not kind of being static about this. Another interesting thing I think is terrific is applying advanced science and technology to our stock assessments. So we're on top of these changes and most sustainably manage our fisheries. Examples include just a fleet of surface, aerial, and undersea drones that we're using to monitor fish and protected species. Great work there. We're establishing an electric monitoring program, or we have one in place already, and we're using that to replace the human observers that go out on fishes and report catch. And that's something that's long overdue and is advancing, and that's great. Another one which I think is fantastic is big data. We are applying big data in a big way, and a great example of that is this EchoCast program, which our Western fisheries have developed. And this is basically a great tool to use real-time information, satellite-derived ocean temperature, and historical patterns for protected species, and really optimize our yields while reducing bycatch. Dr. Elliot Hobbin is here. Elliot, can you raise your hand? Oh, maybe he's playing. Hey, there you are. Elliot, good to meet you. We had a little connection last night. So he has written a fantastic paper in Science Advances, and it was published last week, and it's about dynamical ocean management. That's the way ahead, and I encourage you all to Google it and check it out. Another area we're making great advances is aquaculture, and using aquaculture to address any species that might be in decline because of climate change. And so we're really intent on growing aquaculture in the U.S. to do this, and also to do it because it's important to reduce our seafood trade deficit. We import 80% of the fish that we consume, or seafood in general, but we have the second largest EEZ in the world, and some of the smartest aquaculture scientists ever. And so those two together just make it all the case for having us growing the aquaculture industry in the U.S. Now, there's a change that's occurring, and a phenomenon you're all well aware of, which is a challenge because it impacts both aquaculture and our wild-caught fisheries, and that's ocean acidification. And so I've been around the country. I've seen NOAA and aquaculture partners in the Pacific Northwest, the Chesapeake Bay, Long Island Sound, Narragansett Bay, and the Gulf of Mexico. And I've just seen firsthand the effects, especially on shellfish, of acidification on this $1 billion industry, shellfish production. And so we're doing a lot of hard research to advance our ability to adapt in that area. And so I've seen great examples of monitoring in the field, key research on the impacts to specific stocks. It's not all the same. Some are handling it, some aren't. And then the adaptation techniques, which are really novel, like growing eelgrass, for example, to act as sort of absorb some of the carbon in the water. So we're working really hard to tech transfer all of this great work to small businesses, to others, to just grow this industry. So I'll kind of wrap up the fisheries piece by saying, we are going to see 8.5 billion people on this planet by 2030. So from today, that's like adding a whole nother country of China to the world's population. And that's just in a decade. So we're going to have to address how we are going to provide the protein required in a sustainable way. Fisheries offer the most sustainable path towards that. And so but only through the sound management and world-class science that NOAA Fisheries has shown through example. And so that's something I ask you all to consider going forward. The second piece of the blue economy is the area of recreation and tourism. And that's another really important piece because the outdoor recreation industry, our Department of Commerce's Bureau of Economic Analyses just completed a report that showed that outdoor recreation contributes $374 billion to the economy. Again, that's on the order of the telecom industry, a huge amount. And so the ocean part of that is about a third, $116 billion. And our national marine sanctuaries, for example, under NOAA, 13 of them, contribute about $8 billion to that. So really important part of our economy. And so, examples of things we're doing for the diving community and people who like to snorkel and get underwater, our Coral Reef Conservation Program is doing fantastic work to address severe challenges that we see coral reefs facing in the U.S. and the Virgin Islands and Hawaii and the Marianas and American Samoa territories. And I personally benefit from that because my family and I are all recreational divers, so we're happy about that. Recreational fisheries. So all that great fisheries work I talked about is also supporting 60 million or so recreational anglers all around the country. And I count myself as one of those too. And then there's boating. You know, NOAA's National Ocean Service provides the charts that keep our boaters safe, anybody operating a vessel in inland waters or on the coast. And that's important because our coastlines are changing, water depths are changing, and so that service is more important than ever. And then the Weather Service, of course, is providing our boating community with safe weather forecasts and warnings to keep them safe on the water. And so, and of course, I'm a recreational boat owner too, so I care about that. Now, there's also other activities like swimming and kayaking and hiking and all other things like that. And so we have other services like our harmful algal bloom warning systems that are keeping people safe when these occur in the Great Lakes and in the Gulf Coast, for example, in the Pacific Northwest. And we are doing a whole range of ecosystem science and habitat restoration that is allowing us to preserve nice places to be so people want to be outside and enjoy them. And again, I have a kayak and a stand-up paddleboard, and I get out on the water with my kids, and I want our places to be nice and preserved. So I care personally. And then lastly, our coastal economies, just general support to them with all the science we do to assist local community managers, emergency managers, and natural resource managers in the important work they do to preserve and advance their local economies. But I will highlight something to you. Though we're focused on climate change, there's an important overarching issue here because it's more than that. You know, there's a lot of stressors, anthropogenic stressors on our environment that we have to consider here too, and it's like nutrient runoff, it's habitat conversion and loss, as well as marine debris and plastic and pollution. And those are all important things that we need to consider, I think, on an equal level as climate change. So, to wrap it all up, NOAA's products, services, programs, and people, most importantly, are doing terrific work every day, very hard work, to keep our people safe, to preserve our environments and conserve them, and support the economies which depend upon them. So I kind of like to say that NOAA is working very hard for our oceans so that our oceans can work for us. Now, I'm going to close by kind of paying a little tribute to our next guest speaker and his family and legacy, Philippe Cousteau and his grandfather, Jacques. He, obviously, I think he's got the greater draw than me because he gets a full hour to talk. I only got 15 minutes, but deservedly so because, we are in some way, shape, or form because of what his grandfather, Jacques Cousteau, did to expose this wonderful underwater world to our civilization. And but I want to point something out to you through a personal story. It wasn't just people like you all, ocean enthusiasts that he's touched. And I'll give you an example. So I met with a person named William McCraven this year. He is the chancellor of the University of Texas. And he has a marine science institute under him on the Texas Gulf Coast that was damaged in Hurricane Harvey, and I met with him to talk about helping him restore some of its work in our partnership activity. We also happen to both work with the Navy SEAL teams. He was a SEAL. I worked at the headquarters at a time, so we have a lot of common friends. And you might know his other claim to fame, besides being the UT chancellor, is he's the guy who commanded the raid to kill Osama bin Laden. So he's that guy, 4-star Navy SEAL. And so we were talking, and it turns out, he said, Tim, I wanted to do what all your people do when I was a kid. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I want to put on scuba and count fish. I want to be a marine biologist. I said, really? And he said, yep, my childhood hero was Jacques Cousteau. And so he went to UT, Texas. He majored in biology with this goal of becoming a marine biologist. He thought nothing about the Navy. And it turns out, as you all fisheries folks know, biology is hard. And so he struggled, and he had to not flunk out, he had to change majors to journalism. And yeah, sorry for all you communications types out here. You media, that's not a bad thing. But so he changes to journalism. He gets out, he graduates, and he was crushed. His heart was set on getting underwater. And so he thought to himself, and he said, well, the only way I'm going to get underwater on scuba is join the Navy. And I think it worked out. But at any rate, my point is twofold. First off, Jacques Cousteau and the Cousteau family, the lives you've touched have been more than those who love and appeal the ocean. It's many people in leadership positions that are inspired by your commitment, passion, and dedication. Secondfold, for all of you in the room, be mindful of that when you start your workshops and you go through the program, that yes, you're going to impact our oceans and our environment in a very positive way, so thank you for that. But be mindful that that impact is going to touch far greater than just those who care about the ocean. It's everybody on the planet that depends on them. So thank you all very much.